My mom wants us to split. If you can give her a grandchild, all right, sure. But I'm pregnant, though. Huh? Oh, right, let me introduce myself. I'm Anna, a housewife in my 30s. I live with my husband, who works as a salaried employee. We met when I was working at a food-related company. I was drawn to him because of his occasional charming smile during our many business discussions. So, I took the initiative and asked him out. At first, he declined, saying, "Sorry, I'm flattered, but I have a girlfriend." However, a month later, he approached me and said, "I broke up with her. Can we start dating?" It turns out that after my confession, he started to see me differently. His girlfriend noticed the change in his behavior and asked, "Are you interested in someone else?" When he nodded, she suggested they break up, and he agreed. I felt guilty for ruining their relationship, but he reassured me with a smile, saying, "It wouldn't have lasted anyway. Don't worry." His words comforted me, and after dating for 3 years, we got married. At that time, he told me, "I want to have children after we get married. Could you be a housewife to support me and our future children?" I was working at an exploitative company and didn't want to continue there, so I agreed. I quit my job and became a stay-at-home wife, deciding to support my husband. The transition from working to becoming a full-time housewife was surprisingly difficult and confusing. But I didn't mind because our newlywed life was smooth sailing, and I was at the peak of happiness. Every day was fun and filled with joy, and not having any in-law issues was a big deal for me. My husband's parents lived just a 10-minute walk from our apartment. When I first found out my in-laws lived nearby, I worried they might visit frequently and make things difficult. However, my fears were unfounded. My in-laws were incredibly kind, often coming over to patiently and kindly teach me various things. They never complained about our struggle to conceive and even told me, "I love you more than any grandchild. I've always wanted a daughter since our family is mostly men. Please let me love you like a real daughter." I adored my mother-in-law for that, and I trusted my father-in-law, who was a man of few words but very reliable. However, this warm treatment only lasted for the first few years. Over time, my in-laws' attitudes changed. My father-in-law became even quieter, and my mother-in-law's demeanor shifted so drastically that I wondered if she had a split personality, or perhaps this was her true nature all along. To give you an idea of the change, it felt like she went from +100 to -100. My once loving mother-in-law had become rather tough on me. Because we lived nearby, my mother-in-law frequently popped by our house, and when my husband wasn't around, she would nag me incessantly. She pressured me to have a child soon, saying, "I want to see my grandchild already, and that's your duty as a wife." Not too long ago, she had told me that children are gifts from heaven and that they come naturally when the time is right, so there's no need to rush. Moreover, she began comparing us to other families, saying, "I heard the family next door just had a baby, and the lady next door is pregnant too." This added even more pressure on me. However, no matter how much my mother-in-law pushed, it didn't matter if my husband wasn't on board. At the beginning of our marriage, my husband did say he wanted kids, but about a year after we got married, he seemed to lose interest altogether. Even when I tried to initiate intimacy, he would turn me away, saying, "I'm tired. Let's do it some other day," or "You're bothering me. I'm trying to play my game." When I explained this to my mother-in-law, she didn't seem to understand or empathize, and she continued to pressure me about having a child, causing my stress level to build up day by day. Feeling overwhelmed by my mother-in-law's constant nagging, I confided in my husband about how hard it was being pressured to have kids. Begrudgingly, he said, "I don't see the need to rush," but I agreed to make more effort to have a child together. So we both tried, but no matter how long we waited, I never became pregnant. During this time, my mother-in-law continued to accuse me of not putting in enough effort, sparing my husband from any blame. I started to suspect that the stress from her constant pressure was affecting my ability to conceive. Unable to withstand it anymore, my husband and I decided to seek fertility treatments. Just when I thought I could finally breathe a sigh of relief, a new problem concerning my husband arose. Ever since we started fertility treatment, my husband has been acting cold towards me. He comes home from work and immediately retreats into his room to play video games, often ignoring me when I try to talk to him. That alone would have been bearable, but things took a turn for the worse when he started getting angry at me for spending a little money on sewing materials, my hobby, on stressful days. He'd take out his frustration on me. Whenever I tried to argue back, he'd quickly lose his temper and lash out, repeatedly saying, "Who do you think is providing for you? You're just a freeloader," and continued to behave selfishly. When I remind him that I only quit my job because he wanted me to, he doesn't seem to listen. One day, amidst all the ongoing chaos, my husband, who should have been off to work, was at home playing video games. When I asked, "Aren't you going to work?" he responded, "I quit." Apparently, he had quit his job without even discussing it with me. Shocked, I asked him why, and he snapped, "Get out of my business," and got angry. Frustrated by his uncooperative attitude, I had no choice but to accept the situation. I wasn't panicking about our finances, as I thought we could manage with unemployment benefits and our savings. However, it became stressful when I noticed that my husband showed no interest in finding another job. With his job gone, he started staying home all day. I wished he would go out more, but his hobby was gaming. Aside from the occasional trip to the nearby convenience store for cigarettes, he spent all day at home playing video games. Compared to when he was employed, the time we spent together increased dramatically. If this had been back when we first started dating, I might have seen it as a good thing, having more time for intimacy. But not anymore. Spending more time with my husband, who, like my mother-in-law, had gone from being a +100 to a -100, only led to more marital disputes. Gradually, we realized that even just talking to each other was becoming stressful, leading to less and less conversation. I began to wonder, what's the point of continuing this marriage? I started feeling the limits of our current lifestyle and began thinking about ways to break free from it. One day, fed up with my husband wasting his time gaming at home, I finally lost my patience and snapped, "You're not a child. Stop playing games all the time. Find a job already." In response, my husband said, "Speaking of which, my mom told me to divorce you if you can't give her a grandchild." At that moment, I felt an unexpected gratitude towards my mother-in-law. Who would have thought she'd inadvertently assist me in this way? Ironically, I had discovered I was pregnant earlier that day and had planned to share the news that night. But now, perhaps it was best to keep that to myself, allowing me some distance from both my mother-in-law and my husband. I calmly replied, "All right, understood. Here are the divorce papers." I retrieved the already filled out documents from my drawer and handed them to him. My husband, clearly unprepared for my swift agreement to divorce, let alone for me to produce ready divorce papers, froze in surprise at the sight. His usual air of condescension vanished. He was completely taken aback. Though he seemed to struggle to say something, he felt compelled to follow his mother's advice and signed the papers without much hesitation. Throughout this process, he kept stealing glances at me, trying to gauge my reaction. After finalizing the divorce papers, we agreed to meet later to discuss matters like asset division. However, in truth, we had very little to divide. My husband, known for his spending on hobbies, had poured considerable money into gaming arcades despite criticizing my spending habits. Saving money was a foreign concept to him. My husband, who hadn't saved a penny since his bachelor days, continued this habit after we got married. As a result, we hadn't accumulated any savings or assets during our marriage. When it came time to discuss dividing our belongings, I thought our conversations were straightforward. However, my husband insisted there was more to discuss and pointed to a specific bank book, saying, "We still have our savings, right?" Indeed, that account held a significant amount, and he proposed dividing it. Yet that savings account wasn't subject to property division. This money, I saved before we got married, so it doesn't count in the property division, I explained. My husband's face drained of color upon hearing this, but he quickly recovered and suggested, "But surely this condo should be considered for division. I lived here too." With a firm and somewhat cold smile, I clarified the reality. "Unfortunately, the condo is solely under my name, so legally you have no claim to it. Moreover, I've already listed it for sale, so it's best for you to find new accommodations promptly to avoid any complications," I informed him. I had diligently saved for years with the goal of upgrading to a larger home, anticipating that the condo would eventually feel cramped. Even as a working professional, I had managed to amass substantial savings and purchase the condo during my single years, establishing a financial foundation of my own. The proceeds from selling the condo would enable me to build a new home downtown. Naturally, these assets were acquired before our marriage and were not subject to division. Though my husband may have assumed otherwise, he was mistaken in his expectations. Upon learning that he wouldn't have a claim in the property division, my husband was visibly stunned. Despite our attempts to continue the conversation, he remained in a daze. With nothing more to discuss, our dialogue quickly came to an end. We proceeded to file the divorce papers, and our separation was finalized without complications. A few months later, I relocated to my parents' home where I received their unwavering support during the safe delivery of a healthy baby boy. I named him Richard, a name that signifies strength and ambition. Now, I spend each day cherishing moments with my beloved child and supportive parents. Naturally, I haven't informed my ex-husband. Should he discover the news, I can only imagine my former mother-in-law storming in, demanding, "Where's my grandchild?" After being evicted from the condo, my ex-husband returned to his parents' home, but the speed of our divorce left him reeling. He became increasingly withdrawn, rarely leaving the house, and his appearance became so unkempt that he drew attention from the police when he did venture out. It was a pitiful sight. Later, I learned he had quit his job due to strained relationships at work, where his rude behavior and poor treatment of female colleagues had isolated him completely. Unable to tolerate the situation, he'd abruptly resigned. Perhaps his true nature had always been hidden. He had only shown kindness to me, a wolf in sheep's clothing. 3 years later, I found myself managing the craft store. My regular visits to a local craft store caught the attention of the owner, who approached me one day. "I'm considering retirement. Would you be interested in taking over, Anna?" she asked. With my parents providing strong support with childcare, I had ample free time and was considering re-entering the workforce. Declining would mean the store's closure, inconveniencing many loyal customers. So, after careful consideration, I decided to take on the responsibility of running the store. Today, while serving my occasional regular customers, I was surprised by unexpected visitors. My former mother-in-law and ex-husband. "This shop suits you quite well, doesn't it?" they commented casually. "Sure, Mom. Look, this fabric would look great on you," my ex-husband added, attempting to be congenial. Annoyed by their transparent flattery, I cut to the chase and asked, "So, what brings you here?" That's when my former mother-in-law blurted out something nonsensical. "Give me my grandchild back." Apparently, she had somehow learned about my child and had intentions of making him the heir to their family home. "You were already pregnant when I brought up divorce. Why didn't you tell me?" "I wouldn't have agreed to divorce," accused my ex-husband. "I wanted the divorce, obviously. If you had known I was pregnant, you would have done anything to stop it," I retorted sharply to my ex-husband and former mother-in-law. Then my former mother-in-law continued her nonsense. "So, are you going to give me my grandchild or not?" "I want to be with my grandchild as soon as possible. You've had him for 3 years now. It's my turn." Stunned, I was interrupted by the arrival of my parents and my son Richard, who appeared with concern, asking, "What's going on? Is there a problem?" It turned out they had been alerted by a regular customer and rushed to the shop. Then, as Richard held hands with my parents, my former mother-in-law exclaimed, "Oh, how adorable. He looks just like my son did as a child. Look, I'm your grandma." She attempted to approach Richard, but before I could intervene, Richard firmly declared, "I only have one grandma," and clung tightly to my mother's side. Sensing tension, my mother calmly suggested to my former mother-in-law, "Under the circumstances, it might be best if you leave." Ignoring her, my ex-husband demanded, "Just hand over the kid," as he tried to forcefully snatch Richard away from my parents. Stepping in front of him to protect Richard, I was easily brushed aside due to my smaller stature. "Richard, be careful," with my ex-husband just inches away from grabbing him. A sudden movement caught us all by surprise. "What?" Looking up, I saw my father, who had executed a flawless over-the-shoulder throw. It turned out my father had been a police officer and had competed in national judo championships during his youth. My ex-husband, unaware of this background, was left speechless from the pain, staring at my father with a mix of astonishment and helplessness. "Well then, if you plan on causing any more trouble for my children or grandchild, we may have to involve the authorities." "What will it be?" my father asked firmly, displaying his police badge to my former mother-in-law. Caught off guard, she paled and hastily grabbed my ex-husband's hand before fleeing. Since that day, I've had no contact with either of them, nor do I care to know their whereabouts. A few years later, inspired by my father's bravery, Richard expressed his desire to follow in his footsteps and become a police officer. "When I grow up, I'm going to be a cop too, and I'll protect you," he declared. Now, he's dedicated to his studies with a focus on achieving his goal. Under my father's mentorship, Richard practices judo and has gained recognition among his peers for his skill. As for me, I'll continue to support and watch over my beloved son as he grows.
13 years ago, Michael angrily handed me divorce papers, announcing that he sold our house to move in with someone else. I didn't fully understand it at the time. He coldly instructed me, "Emily, the divorce is final. Take Kevin and leave." Those words lingered in my mind. Years later, Kevin mentioned something surprising after a job interview. Outraged, I confronted the HR interviewer, asking if their company tolerated affairs. To my shock, the interviewer smiled. It was my ex-husband Michael in disguise. "I'm Emily, 48, working at an insurance call center, raising Kevin on my own since Michael abandoned us 13 years ago. I met Michael at 20, working in a pharmaceutical subsidiary. Despite an unexpected pregnancy, he proposed, assuring my father he'd make me happy. We had a simple wedding, and I became a homemaker as Michael returned to the main office. From that point onward, I dedicated myself to managing our home. When Kevin entered elementary school, we acquired a house with assistance from Michael's family. Though I believed I was leading a content life, I ignored the fact that Michael was spending less time at home as Kevin grew older. Marrying at 20, I had no concept of a typical married life, and didn't question not knowing Michael's colleagues or superiors. Looking back, there were numerous signs pointing towards our eventual divorce. Then, on Kevin's 14th birthday, Michael dropped a bombshell. "I've already filed for divorce and sold the house, so pack up and leave." In an instant, I went from being a happy 35-year-old homemaker to a single mother with a 14-year-old son. When I returned to my parents' home unannounced, my brother and his wife treated me with indifference. By then, my father had passed away, and the house was now owned by my brother and his wife. My mother, around 60 at the time, struggled against my strong-willed sister-in-law and my forthright nieces. Amidst all this, Kevin and I were told, "You can stay temporarily, but find a job and move out soon." At that moment, I couldn't think of any job I could immediately secure. I was a high school graduate office worker with no special skills. Nonetheless, I had to figure something out for both myself and my son Kevin. I scoured job listings, searching for something that could sustain us. Fortunately, Kevin, at 14, had enough maturity. They say it's a challenging age, but he displayed better sense than a mother with a young child to care for. I took up a job at an insurance company's call center, drawing on my prior office work experience. Initially a contract employee, I eventually secured a full-time position after a few years. The world of the call center was unfamiliar, and it left me mentally and physically drained initially. However, with time, I realized how little I knew. Being a high school graduate at the time of my divorce, and coming from a family with limited education, my lack of knowledge contributed to financial difficulties post-divorce, which was triggered by infidelity. In hindsight, I should have sought alimony and child support from my ex-husband Michael, but the idea never crossed my mind. My family, including my mother and brother, shared a similar lack of awareness. If my brother had shown even a bit of concern, he might have suggested something through his acquaintances. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. It was only after joining the insurance company and gaining new insights that I realized I had been treated unfairly. By then, too much time had elapsed. That's why I wished for Kevin to pursue as much education as he desired. Knowledge and wisdom can be crucial. I didn't want him to face the same challenges as I did. Fast forward 13 years, my job and life are stable. Kevin secured admission to a prestigious science university, even entering the doctoral program. As a mother, it was astonishing, and he mentioned managing the tuition himself amid his demanding studies. He secured non-repayable scholarships independently, and I merely had to sign the parent section. Throughout his university and graduate school years, he excelled, attracting attention from various companies. As the saying goes, a healthy hen lays white eggs. Kevin's future appears promising. Yet, occasionally, that fateful day when Michael left me still casts a shadow in my thoughts. It happened suddenly. Michael stormed in, threw a crumpled paper at Kevin and me. It was a copy of the divorce papers. I didn't recall signing them, but my name was there in handwriting similar to mine. Confused, I asked what he meant. Michael coldly stated, "I've sold the house because I'm moving in with her." The divorce blindsided me. "Emily, it's final. Take Kevin and leave," he demanded, threatening us to vacate within 3 days. At 35, after being a homemaker for 14 years, I felt lost and headed to my parents' house, haunted by Michael's words. Perhaps I should forget it, but Kevin and I now lead a stable life. It's not lingering attachment. It's frustration at my past helplessness and resentment towards Michael. I realize now that I can do something about it. On a lazy weekend, my phone rang incessantly from an unknown number. Ignoring it, I later heard a voicemail from my ex-mother-in-law requesting to speak to Kevin. Puzzled, I didn't address it directly. That evening, Kevin returned in a suit, laughing uproariously when I mentioned the call. So she did come after all. He explained it was a job interview, but the twist was the pharmaceutical company itself. He mentioned the same place where I used to work as an office clerk in a subsidiary. "Ah, it's not a coincidence," Kevin said casually. "By the way, the HR manager who conducted the interview was Michael Smith." "What did you say?" "Funny thing is, this guy had no idea." "You realized it, of course." "After all, I didn't need such an interview in the first place." "Why?" "This company came scouting for me, so there was no need for an interview." "But as an HR manager, he must have seen your resume, right?" "He must have. But my appearance has changed a lot since middle school, right? Hairstyle, vibe, all that." "Well, that's true. 13 years is a long time. Plus, I doubt he even remembered my face from back then." Upon reflection, that was true. I had been so immersed in my own thoughts, forgetting that Kevin had also distanced himself from Michael. More importantly, given my current address and academic background, even with the same name, he wouldn't recognize me as his son. That might be true. 13 years ago, in his second year of middle school, Kevin had been at best slightly above average in his class. But after our divorce and his transfer to a new school, he began studying unusually hard. His grades suddenly shot to the top. He attended a high school matching his academic performance, maintaining nearly the top spot in science classes. Then he proceeded to a prestigious national university recommended by a professor. In his third year, he completed 5 years of graduate school, from his master's to his doctorate, achieving significant accomplishments in complex fields that I didn't quite understand. The scouting was due to these achievements, desired by several companies in the chemical and physical sciences. In other words, I was the one choosing them, Kevin said nonchalantly. That's why I asked for the interview. I had researched and knew he was the HR manager. I was surprised at his initiative, but he didn't change his expression even when he saw me. The interview was standard, except Kevin had more questions to ask. So I asked the interviewer, "Does your company condone infidelity?" His face then lit up with a smile I had never seen before. And what did he reply, this HR manager? "Of course, it's not ethically acceptable," he said. Hilarious, right? So I continued, "That's strange. Then why are you here?" His face instantly froze. Kevin couldn't stop laughing then. Thankfully, the executive next to him asked me what I meant by that. "That's when I pulled this out," he said, displaying a crumpled piece of paper. It was a copy of the divorce papers Michael had hurled at me. "This is a copy of the divorce papers my mother was deceived into submitting by this man. What does your company think of this?" "You kept that copy all this time?" I thought I had thrown it away. In fact, I was sure I had. I didn't want to see it. I thought I had to throw everything away and leave. "Yeah, I picked it up after you threw it away. That's why it's all wrinkled like this, kept in a clear file. I thought it should never be lost." "Why?" "Because this is evidence of what he did to you and of forging a private document." "Oh, that's not all. There's forgery of private documents and, well, other things. Plus, The divorce papers themselves were invalid at that time, so if he married another woman, it would be bigamy. Bigamy? I'm not an expert, so I asked a friend from the law department at university about it, whether this could be a crime. A crime? Yeah, a clear crime. So I told them right there, isn't this forgery of a private document? I give a copy of the copy to the executive. I see the original of the copy is here, so a copy of the copy but with my fingerprints on the copy. I'm not handing over the actual evidence. And guess what he did next? What happened then? Suddenly, he stood up and shouted, "You're treating your father like a criminal." And then he kept insisting to the executive that what I was saying was a blatant lie and misunderstanding. I couldn't help but feel amused. What was that man thinking? But you got to give it to the executive. He seemed to understand what I was getting at. He turned the questions towards him. You know there's a hierarchy in companies, right? I guess he was aiming for the executive's position. It seemed like the executive was assessing his character first. He kicked him out of the room, then turned to me and said, "Did you ask for this interview not for a job, but for this?" "Yeah, I did," apologize. "I'm truly grateful for the scouting from your company. It's a very attractive company." But I wondered, what if it's an unethical company that would just keep a person like him, bold as brass? I couldn't believe he could say that so smoothly in an interview. The executive was really a great person, whether or not I joined. He thanked me for letting him know. He mentioned when Dad remarried after the divorce. He wondered why Dad chose a much younger woman. And he remembered you, Mom. Really? Yeah, you said our wedding was small scale, right? The executive was there as one of the few guests, as a supervisor back then. That's so. But he said that Dad had been telling everyone around him that he was the one cheated on. But he didn't ask for alimony and just divorced. However, the executive had his doubts about why Dad didn't take custody of me. He guessed it might be me from the photo and the name. What? At that time, you didn't have the knowledge to fight back, so we were thrown out. That's true. I'm so sorry. If it were now, I'd definitely fight with a lawyer. But back then, it's okay. I know you were a full-time homemaker before being suddenly thrown out and had to start working to raise me. Mom, I don't remember much about Dad. He was always gone, maybe working, maybe not. Yes, Michael was hardly ever home back then. Perhaps marrying me was a mistake for him in the first place. He rarely took me to his family's home, only during holidays, and when we went, I was just made to help in the kitchen, and otherwise, we just missed each other with his work. He said he bought a house, but he decided it, and suddenly we were living there. I realized in elementary school that our family was different, so I acted out a bit back then. What did you do? Yeah, an early case of teenage rebellion. So right when I entered middle school, I sensed there was another woman. What are you saying? I didn't tell you because I thought it would make you sad. But I regretted not speaking up, especially when he threw the divorce papers at you and told you to leave. His voice was strained. I had never heard Kevin speak like that before. Mom, I decided I needed a weapon that would make me indispensable. A weapon. Something that would let me eventually hold him accountable for what he did. Then Kevin said, I hate to say it, but I took your situation as a lesson on what not to do. A lesson. Yeah, maybe he easily discarded you, and nobody could oppose it because you and your family didn't have the knowledge to fight back. To be honest, I'm also angry at your brothers. You're not going to your uncles? No, too much hassle. But even if I get a good job and succeed, I'll never associate with them. Oh, except Grandma. Really? I felt a bit relieved. Yeah, because Grandma remembered your situation and repeatedly told me she was sorry. When did she tell you this? After I entered university. My cousins from your brother's side were acting flirty because I was in that university, which was annoying. I was shocked. I had no idea my nieces behaved like that. Hey, Mom, what if we took Grandma in? She's always been sorry towards you. It seems painful watching her have to be careful around my aunt and them. Thank you. After we finished talking, I brought up something that had been on my mind. By the way, I've been getting a lot of calls from unknown numbers lately. Let me see, Kevin said, taking my phone. Oh, this? It's his family's number. The executive told me, Kevin said dismissively. Then he called them and put it on speaker mode. Hello? Is that Kevin? It was my ex-mother-in-law's voice on the other end. Kevin muttered under his breath about her calling him by his first name. Yes, I heard from your father. You went all the way to a doctoral program at that university, and you're getting company offers. To think that a young man born to that woman turned out so well. It must be thanks to our family's blood. Kevin muttered to himself again. Hey, would you like to be adopted into our family? You're going to be busy and need money, right? Better than staying with that poor woman. Plus, you're old enough now, right? We can arrange a good marriage for you. How about it? Sounds good, right, Kevin? Are you listening? I apologize for being such a woman. I spoke coldly into the phone. By the way, did you think I had cheated? Well, oh, I see. It's not true. In that case, Kevin says he won't hold back. Let me pass the phone to him. Long time no see. I was surprised to hear from the company executive that my mom was accused of cheating. So you're part of it too. No, you were deceived by Michael. You're calling my mom that woman, but you realize you were complicit in a crime, right? What? Unfortunately, the statute of limitations has passed. But your son committed bigamy by forging divorce papers and remarrying. It's embarrassing that I'm related to such a person. Of course, I want nothing to do with his parents. Oh, and a lawyer will be contacting your son soon for me and my mom. You don't want the inheritance. When I die, it'll all go to you, Kevin snorted. I don't need that. You should worry about the alimony payments instead. He ended the call. Did I go too far? I shook my head vigorously, and laughter bubbled up from within. That's the spirit. If you're going this far, I need to step up too. Kevin patted my back with encouragement. After that, I got a lawyer through Kevin's friend and started working on an alimony claim. The usual statute of limitations for alimony claims due to infidelity is 3 years. But I learned about something called an exclusion period. It's valid for 20 years from the act of infidelity. I found out about Michael's cheating 13 years ago, but never investigated who he remarried or the details. I couldn't bear to think about it and didn't have the capacity. But I looked into it again. Included in the alimony claim were the facts of him forging the divorce papers and then submitting a marriage registration, constituting forgery and bigamy. Although we couldn't pursue criminal charges due to the statute of limitations, it served as a weapon for the alimony claim. I claimed alimony from Michael and his current wife and 4 years of child support for Kevin. After that, my phone started ringing nonstop again. Bigamy. What have you told him? You're ruining me. You want to destroy my wife and kids too. I let you live comfortably for 14 years. Don't think this will end here. So I replied just once. Why not sell your house then? And then I changed my phone number. As a result of our double attack, Michael paid the alimony, was demoted from HR manager, and transferred to a far-off factory as an assistant manager. I heard this from the executive I met again. Apparently, his new position is akin to a nominal busybody, unable to defy the factory manager. Indeed, even with the statute of limitations, now that several of his crimes have come to light, his reputation has hit rock bottom. He was on the elite track in the company, but now it's over. The pharmaceutical company's factory is located far from the capital region. Michael had to sell his apartment and turn it into alimony for me as part of his transfer. That was the only way he could pay the amount we demanded. Moreover, his wife and children had to move with him. It seems she had no one else to rely on. She married him at 20, just like me, and had been a homemaker ever since, enjoying the status of a high-ranking husband's wife. That backfired. She wanted to stay in the capital region with her children, but that was impossible. Her parents' home is as rural as the place he was transferred to. Apparently, she's not well liked by her in-laws, but I have my doubts about the in-laws too, given how they treated me. I'm not surprised, But marrying off their son to a 20-year-old bride twice should have been a sign for them to sort out their son. They should have advised their criminal son before cutting off their incompetent grandchildren. Well, that's probably why they cozied up to Kevin. Ah, here's a brilliant grandchild. But that's irrelevant to Kevin. By the way, I heard an interesting story after settling the alimony issue. My lawyer shared this with me. Wow, that guy is really a city boy through and through. What do you mean? His new place of work requires a car. I clapped my hands in realization. He's over 50 and rushing to a driving school to desperately get a driver's license. Both he and his wife too. Without a car, they can't survive there. For things like taking kids to and from school, shopping. Also, in such rural areas, you won't get hired for part-time work without transportation. I laughed, realizing the situation. I have a driver's license. My mother insisted I get it, even lending me money for it. That was the right decision. Just hearing about them is hilarious. A proud former elite over 50 chased by mundane tasks, learning the hard reality of getting a license from strict driving instructors. And the following spring, Kevin entered a training institute of another company, finally able to focus solely on his research, enjoying every day. Revenge is over. Now it's time for fun. For my youth. Well, an early marriage isn't always good, right? By the way, did you think I had cheated? Well, oh, I see. It's not true. In that case, Kevin says he won't hold back. Let me pass the phone to him. Long time no see. I was surprised to hear from the company executive that my mom was accused of cheating. So you're part of it too? No, you were deceived by Michael. You're calling my mom that woman, but you realize you were complicit in a crime, right? What? Unfortunately, the statute of limitations has passed. But your son committed bigamy by forging divorce papers and remarrying. It's embarrassing that I'm related to such a person. Of course, I want nothing to do with his parents. Oh, and the lawyer will be contacting your son soon for me and my mom. You don't want the inheritance. When I die, it'll all go to you. Kevin snorted. I don't need that. You should worry about the alimony payments instead. He ended the call. Did I go too far? I shook my head vigorously, and laughter bubbled up from within. That's the spirit. If you're going this far, I need to step up too. Kevin patted my back with encouragement. After that, I got a lawyer through Kevin's friend and started working on an alimony claim. The usual statute of limitations for alimony claims due to infidelity is 3 years, but I learned about something called an exclusion period. It's valid for 20 years from the act of infidelity. I found out about Michael's cheating 13 years ago, but never investigated who he remarried or the details. I couldn't bear to think about it and didn't have the capacity. But I looked into it again. Included in the alimony claim were the facts of him forging the divorce papers and then submitting a marriage registration, constituting forgery and bigamy. Although we couldn't pursue criminal charges due to the statute of limitations, it served as a weapon for the alimony claim. I claimed alimony from Michael and his current wife and 4 years of child support for Kevin. After that, my phone started ringing nonstop again. Bigamy. What have you told him? You're ruining me. You want to destroy my wife and kids too. I let you live comfortably for 14 years. Don't think this will end here. So I replied just once, why not sell your house then? And then I changed my phone number. As a result of our double attack, Michael paid the alimony, was demoted from HR manager, and transferred to a far-off factory as an assistant manager. I heard this from the executive I met again. Apparently, his new position is akin to a nominal busybody, unable to defy the factory manager. Indeed, even with the statute of limitations, now that several of his crimes have come to light, his reputation has hit rock bottom. He was on the elite track in the company, but now it's over. The pharmaceutical company's factory is located far from the capital region. Michael had to sell his apartment and turn it into alimony for me as part of his transfer. That was the only way he could pay the amount we demanded. Moreover, his wife and children had to move with him. It seems she had no one else to rely on. She married him at 20, just like me, and had been a homemaker ever since, enjoying the status of a high-ranking husband's wife. That backfired. She wanted to stay in the capital region with her children, but that was impossible. Her parents' home is as rural as the place he was transferred to. Apparently, she's not well liked by her in-laws, but I have my doubts about the in-laws too, given how they treated me. I'm not surprised, but marrying off their son to a 20-year-old bride twice should have been a sign for them to sort out their son. They should have advised their criminal son before cutting off their incompetent grandchildren. Well, that's probably why they cozied up to Kevin. Ah, here's a brilliant grandchild. But that's irrelevant to Kevin. By the way, I heard an interesting story after settling the alimony issue. My lawyer shared this with me. Wow, that guy is really a city boy through and through. What do you mean? His new place of work requires a car. I clapped my hands in realization. He's over 50 and rushing to a driving school to desperately get a driver's license. Both he and his wife too. Without a car, they can't survive there. For things like taking kids to and from school, shopping. Also, in such rural areas, you won't get hired for part-time work without transportation. I laughed, realizing the situation. I have a driver's license. My mother insisted I get it, even lending me money for it. That was the right decision. Just hearing about them is hilarious. A proud former elite over 50 chased by mundane tasks, learning the hard reality of getting a license from strict driving instructors. And the following spring, Kevin entered a training institute of another company, finally able to focus solely on his research, enjoying every day. Revenge is over. Now it's time for fun. For my youth? Well, an early marriage isn't always good, right? My mother, who now lives with us, often uses exactly Kevin, who never had time for a girlfriend, now has the chance to find someone right for him. With Kevin's employment, we moved to a slightly bigger place, roughly midway between our workplaces. For a while, the three of us want to peacefully enjoy these long-awaited